Thank you very much. First, I want to welcome you all to Jerusalem. Some of you I've already had the pleasure of talking to. Others are new. And let me just point out that sometimes people describe Yeshiva or Orthodox Judaism as a cult. We keep you up late. We give you a lot of starch to eat, etc. But you know, you really have to understand that it's exactly the opposite. We're not here to change you. We're not here to force you. We're not here to brainwash you. We are here to inform you. Because when people make choices, choices are meaningful only if they are made out of knowledge and not when they are made out of default or ignorance. You have to know what Judaism is before you decide to accept it or reject it. We hope and we pray that you will see the beauty and the wisdom and you will embrace it. But that is your decision. As Rabbi Gottlieb quoted the Rambam, free will is the cornerstone of Judaism. But free will is meaningful only when there is knowledge. And the purpose of this type of program is that you at least begin to acquire some knowledge of Judaism, and hopefully you will continue in your quest. And then and only then are you able to make the decisions as to how you want to live your life. I want to start with something that goes back a few months. Most of you probably had a Passover Seder, one way or the other. And there's a very interesting passage in the Seder, in the Haggadah. Maybe you'll remember this. Each person must regard themselves as if they themselves were liberated from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And the question becomes, that's a nice sentence, but what does it mean? I was never in Egypt, even as a tourist. I certainly was not a slave in Egypt. In what possible sense can it be said, each person must regard themselves as if they were liberated from Mitzrayim, which is translated as Egypt? And there's a beautiful commentary by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who says there's a double entendre here. The word Mitzrayim, which is the Hebrew word for Egypt, also comes from the word Meitzar, which is limitation, constriction, and blockage. King David says in the Psalms, Min ha-meitzar karati ka, I call out to God from the narrow, confining spaces. Seen in this way, each person has their own inner Mitzrayim. My ego, my arrogance, my laziness, my hedonism. And the exodus of Egypt is really a metaphor for the spiritual power that God gave to each and every one of us to be liberated from our inner Mitzrayims. And as the saying goes, it's easier to take the Jew out of Mitzrayim than it is to take Mitzrayim out of the Jew. If I may quote the great non-Jewish wise philosopher, Mr. T, who is a well-known entertainer, at least he was. And Mr. T once said something that I thought was very profound, perhaps accidentally profound, but it resonated with me. He was asked why he wears so much gold jewelry. Chains, gold chains around his neck. And his answer was, he wants to emulate his forefathers, his ancestors that came from Africa. They were brought to the United States as slaves wearing leg irons, wearing chains. They wore chains and he wore chains. The difference is their chains are iron and on the leg, and his chains are gold around the neck. This is a very wise remark, because what Mr. T is teaching us is that the gold chain around the neck can be every bit as enslaving as the iron chain around the leg. You can be a slave to careerism, getting ahead, power, abusing other people because you're looking after number one, neglecting your family, your wife and your children to get ahead in the world. You can be a slave to your arrogance and to your ego, to your conceit, to your depression and despair. And that is also our Mitzrayim. And every single day, God is telling us we can be liberated from our Mitzrayim. You know, I was a professor of law for many, many years, for almost 30 years. In fact, my classmate in law school is the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, so I had very eminent classmates. And as a result, though, because I taught for so many years, you know, my students, you know, became attorneys, and, you know, some of them are retiring now from the practice of law, and I've even had second-generation law students, children of people that are, you know, that I taught. And one of the things that you know over many, many years, and this is not only in law, I'm familiar with law, but this applies across the board, is the phenomenon of burnout or midlife crisis, or whatever you want to call it. You know, legend has it that when Alexander the Great was only 30 years old, he died. And the legend is, well, that is true, but the legend is that he was sobbing and he died because he said he had no more worlds to conquer. He had accomplished all that was within his capacity to accomplish. What was he to do with the rest of his life? All of us in this age of ambition are really on a treadmill from the time that we're very, very young. In Manhattan, there was actually a 5-year waiting list for some kindergartens or nurseries. That actually means as soon as your wife is pregnant, you better file an application. What difference does it make what kindergarten you get into? Because you meet the right people, etc. So we work hard to get into the best kindergarten, the best primary school, the best prep schools, the best high schools, the best colleges, the best graduate schools, the best clerkships. And then we achieve, hopefully, some professional success, whether it's law, medicine, architecture, science, whatever it is. And we're running, because there's always another brass ring to catch on the never-ending carousel. But what happens at some point, maybe when you're 35, maybe when you're 45, maybe when you're 55 or older, in which you have gone as far as you're going to go. In law, you know you're not going to be on the Supreme Court. You're not going to win the Olympic gold medal. You probably will not get the Nobel Prize. You've reached, you know, the top as far as you're going to go. Where do you go from there? What do you do with the rest of your life? Well, I really don't want to be pessimistic. I really don't want to be a downer. Now you're young, you're ambitious, you have so many good years ahead of you. But I can tell you, both from personal and collective experience, that there's going to come a time in your life in which you're going to say, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Am I living for another deal, another merger or acquisition? Nobody ever said in their last moments on earth, I wish I made another deal. Why did I let that go away? You're going to be asking, we're all going to be asking, I wish I spent more time with my children. I wish I was a kinder person. I wish I didn't get so angry over things that there was no reason to be upset about. The point is, if you don't invest in the internal dimensions of your life, in terms of becoming a loving and compassionate and giving person, and a person who looks for a way to make some contribution to the world, and that doesn't have to be a famous thing, but just in terms of, you know, raising a family, connecting to God and to the Jewish people, then there's going to come a point in time that all of the different things that seem to have been so satisfying are going to turn like ashes in your mouth. So when you're young and you're energetic and you have time, and I know that college students think they're very busy. Indeed you are. But I can tell you, and the young professionals can certainly confirm this, that you're never going to have as much time and opportunity as you have now. Things just get worse as you go on. So this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity where you're not just in Israel and having a wonderful, elevating experience, but you are beginning the investments in the interiority of your lives. That is almost like an insurance policy against the malaise that inevitably hit people later when they haven't developed some internal structure of what is life about. Erich Fromm, who happened to be Jewish, although non-observant, a disciple of Freud, who also happened to be Jewish, but not observant, although Freud actually came from a long line of rabbis, once remarked, we make a very big mistake when we think that freedom is defined as getting away from something. Freedom has to be towards something. Why do I want freedom? Why do I want financial security? Why do I want success? To have a what without a why is condemning you to frustration. And let me end with again, a non-Jewish quote, a little bit more erudite than Mr. T. This is the famous Indian poet Tagore, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the 1920s. And he compared a human soul to a violin string. A violin string is capable of the most beautiful and exquisite music. But if you take a loose string and just put it on the kitchen table, it cannot produce any sound at all. The music emerges from the string only when the string is tied down and stretched across the bridge of the violin. And the metaphor is the apparent paradox between submission and freedom. That when you submit to the moral and ethical commandments of God, really all of God's commandments, that does not enslave you, that does not limit you. That opens you up to infinite possibilities of beauty and goodness, unlocking the creativity within in a directed and focused manner. That slavery of slavery to God is ultimately the most liberating decision that you will make. My blessing, my prayer, and I know I speak for all of us at Ohr Somayach, again, this is your decision. We're not into the brainwashing business at all. You are mature adults, and you will make the decisions as to how you will live your life. But we hope that you will be inspired. We hope you will learn a lot. You will pick up a lot of knowledge. You will see the great secrets of how this small, numerically insignificant nation, known as the Jewish people, has made such a disproportionate contribution to the world. What is the secret? What is our secret? And whatever it is, I hope that you will want to be a part of it. Thank you very much.